Hello everyone, it's been a while. I saw this post today and it reminded me of a video I made about a year ago at this point where I was discussing the absurdities of the meme coin market at the time and how much money people were making off of just absurd bets, as well as the absurd things people were saying about the perceived longevity of how amazing the situation was. Safe to say, none of it aged as any of those people thought, as I'm sure most of us knew. However, the broad market continued higher, which is at least somewhat deserved considering how insane things were, how much money people were making. I highlighted in that video a post that said Trump on its first day or 2 days or something outperformed the S&P since 1985, and I see now that at least someone made it out alive and well outside of Trump himself, though I can only imagine how much has actually been lost on this. And of course, people who lose their money on these things don't post about it in the same way that people who make money on them do. Very clearly, there has been more losses than gains here. That's just how it goes. But if you go back and search these tickers or anything about them when they were at their top, you get to see some of the posts from the time. And I think it's always interesting to go back and look at some of the absurdities of prior cycles and also to remember how they made you feel personally. Please go look at the video I made back then because it's reasonably well made and very on brand of how things felt at the time. But the whole thing was absurd, is absurd, almost unbelievable that it happened. And to some extent, it still happens. It probably or certainly will happen again in the same medium or another, but sometimes are just hard to repeat. This thing did hit $70 billion after all. I talked about this in the other video, but this specifically was just remarkable. And while that was insane, at least it was sponsored by the president. There were so many other things that were absurd that happened that weren't sponsored by the president. For instance, these hitting $2 billion in valuation. That's a lot of money. Not as much anymore. It's only worth 150 million now. That's $2 billion, by the way, that doesn't exist anymore. But at the top, how many people posted their returns, posted how great these things were, convinced each other to buy it, however they pursued their endeavors. Now it's worthless, and you don't see the posts, at least as many posts of people crashing out about how much they've lost. You don't see it. So there is a psychological impact on both sides of that, in the sense that trading already impacts you much more negatively than positively. The hits against you hurt 1,000 times more than the wins on your behalf feel good. But that's amplified when your community, the people that you see online, also only post about their wins much more so than they post about their losses. I have no idea who this is. I have no idea if this is real, but this is just exemplary of the things that you would see and the gut-wrenching feeling you would assume, knowing that you could have done something like that if you were in those types of markets. I don't trade crypto personally. For me, it might be something like missing out on an oil rally on the Iran war and seeing someone else post about it, knowing that could be me. Missing out then feels much worse than winning on a similar bet would feel good, because even in that situation, you'd also still see somebody posting about how much better they're doing in the same position than you are. Of course, that's just part of the game, and that's just me riffing, but it's very interesting psychologically to see how these things have shifted over the past year when you almost felt insane for not being driven up the wazoo on crypto, Trump coin, whatever was the hot name at the time. And in avoiding damages, you don't feel the sense of vindication that it appears to you that others felt when they were posting their returns at the highs. And accepting that reality is, of course, part of trading, part of markets, part of living in the financial world. But I think it's important to talk about from time to time. Of course, you have some of the well-aged posts from the times being things like this from Martin discussing the incredible short positions. And funny enough, everyone was still ripping in the comments, despite how well this inevitably aged. It's always just very interesting to see. The follow-up on this specifically, it's still not even there yet. But maybe we'll get there in due time. I'm sure we will. These things still have no intrinsic value. And funny enough, in my last video, I highlighted how if things without any intrinsic value could get absurd, companies with real value could get incredibly lucrative in terms of their price appreciation. And we have since, of course, seen the incredible semiconductor rally, which is much more backed by earnings than anything crypto related was at the time. And while maybe this fades, I think it's a much more real phenomenon than something that has been purely pumped through hype. But the damages that people feel through losses in worthless coins like that make it less likely for them to psychologically be able to hold winning positions that would have ended up making up for those defaults. I know that that's affected me at times where I'll lose on something stupid, and then the thing that I have an appropriate opinion on, I won't hold as I should. And I'm sure that losses in weird fashions relating to crypto over the last year has negatively impacted people in that way on numerous occasions. But that's just the world we live in, and we have to deal with it. On an unrelated note, God bless anyone who is still in the trenches of these absurd coins. I don't know why you would still be trading them. I imagine that has to be harder than trading softs, which are a travesty. But that's just how it is. I have lots of stuff that aged poorly from back in the day. My 2023 posts were all atrocious. We all learn, we all live and learn. But I had a lot last year where I was just very on the ball about the situation here and how absurd it eventually would be shown to be, because this was more or less much more of a certainty than any bearish market opinion, because markets are in general correlated to the real world and productivity is increasing globally. However, for things like this with no intrinsic value, it's clear that at some point people are, will, and had to at some point exchange their potentially worthless money for real money when conviction decreased, specifically along with price, which is always the interesting part of it, that it's sort of self-fulfilling on both sides, on the way up and the way down, in crypto especially, but also in markets. Anyways, I was just reminiscing about how I felt through some of these experiences, through some of the things my friends talked to me about at the time. I saw that post. I felt like making another video, so thanks for watching. Please subscribe. See you next time, maybe.